Okay, today we are planting potatoes. So potatoes are a great crop to plant in the spring. So typically along the Wasatch Front, we plant like 1st of April through mid-April. So I'm just kind of at the end of planting time, but it's been so wet, I haven't wanted to get out. So potatoes love sunshine. So you want something with like an area to plant potatoes in with about 6 hours at minimum of sunlight a day. So anywhere 6+ hours, they'll do great in full sun all day, but they love the sun. And then next, potatoes love a loose soil. So as you can see, my soil is loose and workable, and that's because a potato is an underground plant. So all of your, I wouldn't call it a fruit, but your vegetable is happening on the tubers underneath the ground. So you want to have loose soil that those tubers can form in, and if it's too compacted, they're gonna have a hard time forming nice big potatoes. If your soil isn't nice and loose and you have really clay-like soil, you can add organic matter and compost. You can see in my soil we've got pine needles and leaves and things that haven't decomposed all the way, but that just helps loosen up your soil. Next, we are going to fertilize. So potatoes love fertile soil. So we are going to be fertilizing. You don't have to worry so much about your nitrogen with potatoes because you're not worrying about the upper part of the growth, the green part of the growth. You want your tubers to grow so you get bigger potatoes. So something with more potassium and phosphorus. So a great fertilizer would be something like 5-10-10 or an 8-24-24, and when you look at a fertilizer package, they will have those numbers on it, and those numbers mean nitrogen, potassium and phosphorus. So you want those two end numbers to be your highest numbers. They also love, if you're more into like organic gardening, they love bone meal and blood meal. Epsom salt is a great one to work in with them. Potatoes love high sulfur soils. So today I am going to be mixing in, I'm using a Langbeinite. This is actually the first year I've used a Langbeinite. So I can't tell you if I like it that much, but that's what I'm going to be working in for my fertilizer. So I'm going to just use a couple cups per row, and I'm just going to be sprinkling it in. Nothing too difficult. And then once I sprinkle it in, I'm just going to work it into the bottom of my trenches. I guess I should say that I am planting my potatoes in trenches. There's a couple different ways to plant potatoes, but I have found that if I dig a trench that's about like 6 to 7 inches deep and plant my potatoes in that way, I do less healing throughout the season, and that's become my favorite way to plant potatoes. So that is what I'm doing. So I've got my trench dug, and I've just worked some fertilizer into those few inches in the bottom of the soil. Okay, and I'm also just going to sprinkle it in some all-purpose fertilizer. This one's an organic one that I actually experimented with all last summer, and I've really liked it. It is a bit smelly, so be warned, but once it's worked into your soil and gets watered in, you can't smell it anymore. But when you open the bag, you for sure can smell it. Now we're going to prep the potatoes. So prepping the potatoes is totally optional depending on what your potatoes look like. Mine are going crazy and the eyes are like growing nuts. So I can see where I can make cuts very easily. Like on this potato, it's a little fresher. The eyes are just barely starting to come out, and it makes it a little bit more tricky if you're going to prep your potatoes. So by prepping your potatoes, we're just going to be cutting them into sections and cutting eyes off. And all this does is it gives you more potatoes. So instead of having one potato put in the ground, you have two. So this is also called a seed potato. So if you ever are like, how do I get a seed for potato? It's actually the potato. So, and if you went to the grocery store and you're like, well, I have these extra potatoes in my basement, like that you bought from the grocery store, can I just plant those? I would say no, because a lot of times, especially if they're not organic potatoes, they've been sprayed with a sprout inhibitor and they won't sprout. They won't get these little eyes. So if you put this in the ground, it would just rot. But if it's an organic potato, then it will start to get little sprouts. You just have to be a little bit leery of what kind of disease or field these came from. Whereas like if you buy a certified seed potato, you know that they're certified disease-free. So when we're going to be prepping a potato, you can see I've sliced one in half here. I am just going to locate a good place to slice. So I brought these two different ones because I feel like this one, I'm only having tubers and roots coming, the plant is only starting to grow out of one side. and there's not really a lot going on this side. So I'll probably just plant this as one. Whereas this one, we've got some over here, back here, and right here. So I could come through, I'm just going to take a really sharp knife, and I want this eye to be separate from these eyes over here. So I'm just going to take my knife and make a sharp cut. Now you can see I have two opportunities for potato plants to grow. Now when you do this, when you hill your potato over, or not hill it, when you cut it, you're going to want it to hill over before you plant it. So that means just letting it sit out like this for a couple days, and it just kind of creates some scarring on there before you put it in the ground, and it just helps it to not rot. And then if you're not cutting them, you'll just have your whole potato. So you're simply just going to be placing your potatoes at the bottom of the trench. You're going to want to make sure the eye side where the plant has started to grow is up. This is not the root that's going to grow down into the ground. This is the plant that's going to come out of the ground. So you're just going to simply set it in your trench. I'm going to do about, I don't know, 8 inches apart. I always plant a little bit closer than what they recommend, just because I am tight on garden space. So about 8 inches apart, my rows, by the time they're done being planted, this section is probably 7 feet by 3 feet, and I will probably get 20-ish potatoes in this area. The last thing that we're going to do is just cover these potatoes right in the trench. They're going to be about 4 to 6 inches deep. The thing that I like about this trench planting method is that I don't have to come through and hill these all summer long. I might have to come through when the plant gets 8 to 10 inches tall and hill just a teeny bit, but the reason you hill is because if a potato plant comes out of the top of the soil, like if the actual potato is exposed to sunlight, it produces a poison that turns the potato green, and then you can't use the potato. So that's why we like to hill them up. But I have found that this trench method helps so we don't have to hill all summer long. So we will just continue to cover our rows. And then the last thing we're going to do is water them in. So potatoes love consistent watering. So you will want to water your potatoes, I don't know, maybe once a week, probably less often during these spring months when it's still cooler and we're getting moisture. But once it's warming up and we're depending on our sprinkling systems, you'll probably want to water them 1 to 2 times a week. And you're just going to want to make sure that the soil is soaked. But then between waterings, you want to make sure that that top few inches of soil is drying out so your potatoes don't get rot and have problems. And that is simply how we plant potatoes. And then the way we know we're ready to harvest our potatoes is when the plant will start to kind of yellow and fall over in the fall, and you'll know that the plant is ready to be harvested. Typically potatoes are a longer season plant, and they will take, depending on the variety, between like 100 and 120 days. So you can mark on your calendar, you'll kind of know, but usually it's the fall time and your tops will start to brown and fall over and kind of yellow out, and you'll know you can go dig your potatoes.